Hey, orichaclconyt here, though you can call me Ori for close. By now, you've probably already seen a plethora of guides on how to play Dead by Daylight. There's hundreds of videos detailing loop strategies, general tile logic, and general game sense for survivors, as well as both surface level and deep dive guides on specific killers. However, I've found that if you want a video about general killer strategy, game sense, and detailed explanations, you don't actually have relevant videos that apply to nowadays meta. Thus, I've decided that I wanted to share a bit of my knowledge and way of understanding this game with you, community. Am I a comp player? No. Am I one of those players that have streaks of up to 200 wins on every killer? No. So why would you want to hear anything that I have to say about this? Hey, don't ask me. You clicked on the video. Also, like I said before, you're fresh out of options. What do you say we cut right to the chase? In Dead by Daylight, the killer's objective is, well, to kill as many survivors as they can. The community at large has sort of determined what exactly counts as a loss and as a win. For instance, for the killer player, most people will agree that a 3k and above counts as a win, with some saying that a 2k is a tie and anything below is a complete loss. This guide is aimed at helping you achieve that win condition as often as possible. But keep in mind that if you just love running your favorite chase trapper, though this guide will still help you, you won't exactly 4k every match. Although I've quite literally just stated what the general objective for the killer is, killing survivors, it actually helps to think of it in another way. Your objective is essentially to delay the survivors' objectives from being completed while you choke them out of the game bit by bit. Explosive games do happen, don't get me wrong, but most games will happen within the stereotype that I've just described, a drawn-out game where you slowly build up an advantage. So how do we actually achieve this slowdown on killers that I've just described? Well, just use Pain Rest, Corrupt, Grim on literally every killer, right? Though that certainly would help you, it might surprise you to learn that the main slowdown in Dead by Daylight doesn't come from perks, add-ons, or killer choice, but rather it comes from a concept that is thrown around like a hot potato, but coincidentally, no one wants to explain since it's so abstract. I will attempt to explain it to you now. Let's take a deep dive into what pressure is. Right, so what is pressure? It can actually be defined in a very simple way. Pressure refers to the amount of survivors that are unable to progress their objectives at the moment. In this guide, I'll even assign a number to it, like in Pathfinder, the best TTRPG. If you're chasing a survivor, we'll say you have pressure 1, because that one survivor you're chasing cannot physically work on gens right now. If you think about the game in this way, you can begin to understand when you're strong and when you're weak and start playing accordingly in both situations. The best way to fully make sure that you understand me is by giving you an example. For the following situation, imagine that you're just a generic N1 killer without a power. You've just loaded into the match. Right now, at this very moment, you have pressure 0, since nothing is currently stopping survivors from slamming the gens. Naturally, you start looking for a target and eventually find the survivor. The first chase of the match begins. You are now on pressure 1. Eventually, you down the survivor, grab them, and hook them. What pressure are we on right now? Well, obviously the hook survivor cannot work on gens, so that's pressure 1 achieved. But the hook player needs someone else to unhook them, and that person cannot be working on gens while doing it, so you actually have pressure 2 at the moment. A smart observation right now would be, but can the survivors of Hook just ignore the hook for a while until they do some gens? Wouldn't that mean that you actually only have pressure 1, since the Hook survivor is the only one physically being kept from doing gens? This is where I introduce the fundamental rule of pressure. At any point, survivors might try to ignore the amount of power, of pressure, you have at a given point in the match. However, if you identify this, you can punish it. Remember this, the punishment for ignoring killer pressure far exceeds the cons of respecting it. Let me clear all of this up by continuing the example from before. After you hook a survivor, you have pressure 2. If survivors play as though you have a pressure 1 and just slam gens for a while, you can identify it and punish hard. Let's take a look at how. So, you've hooked the survivor and are now looking to chase a new one. You eventually find one and land the first hit after, let's say, 40 seconds in total. But you notice something interesting. An unhook on your last survivor hasn't been performed yet. If you let that fact slip and you continue your current chase, you've essentially forgiven the survivor team for an incredibly high-risk play, and you'll fall behind by a lot, since they both got the benefit from maximizing gen efficiency and they also get the free unhook. The punish in this situation is to go back to the hook and force the survivor team to trade something for the time they spent on their gens. A survivor hitting second stage on hook is no joke at all. It can even win you the game on the spot. Now you don't need to find them again, chase them, hit them twice, pick them up without being pallet or flash saved, and hook them. All of that time has been given to you for free. Now, you shouldn't confuse this momentary camping with straight up full hook phase camping. If you don't move from the hook at all, you can't pressure other survivors, and thus, you're effectively reducing your own pressure. You should only ever camp the last few seconds of a hook stage to secure the transition into the next stage. That way, you can pressure some gens and still come back in time to get the same benefit of a full camp without its downsides. Right now, the worst case scenario for you is a trade, which basically means skipping, scouting, and chasing the next survivor altogether. Not bad. See how you can absolutely destroy a team when they don't respect the pressure you have? Now you could either take the trade or slug the survivor trading and actively look for the tunnel. The one that you should go for will vary depending on the state of the game, as well as your killer and build choice. However, as a rule of thumb, we can refer to our definition of pressure to see what's, at least immediately, more effective at removing survivors from their gens. If you take the trade, you go back to pressure 2, just like before. Still a very solid state to be in. You also have the benefit of a survivor being injured, the one that just got off the hook. So they might want to take care of that to prevent a possible snowball and give you more time on the trial. If you skip the trade and go for the tunnel, you immediately get to pressure 3. That's the survivor slug, the survivor you're chasing, and the survivor that will come to pick the slug up. However, tunneling a single hook survivor is not the best idea with the amount of anti-tunnel perks going around. Think of it. If you chase the tunnel and you end the chase after eating a DS and a dead heart, what is your reward? A pitiful second stage for all the pressure you've given up. In my opinion, you should only ever tunnel a survivor when that means removing them from the game, or if you're absolutely certain that they don't have anti-tunnel. But Ori, I hear you saying, every YouTuber has told me that slugging and tunneling are the most OP strategies in the entire game. And you're saying that I shouldn't always go for this in my games? Yes. As we've discussed, slugging gives you a lot of immediate pressure, but in order to capitalize on it, you need to do it when it is smart to. Slugging every single down will just lose you every game. Unless you're on Blight or Nurse, who are way too strong for that to matter. So how does one take advantage of this mechanic? By having a mental timer of their recovery. See, good survivors will always wait until the slug is 95% recovered, the maximum amount they can achieve for themselves, before they go in for the pickup, to avoid being targeted themselves, which can lead to a huge snowball. The self-recovery time to 95% is of 30 seconds. This means that, just like with going back to hook late, you can actually take a little time to pressure nearby areas before you need to go back and hook that survivor to prevent their team from picking them up. In a way, during those 30 seconds, picking up isn't your responsibility, but rather theirs. Furthermore, being healed from slug is a lot more risky than being unhooked, since you don't get any of the basic help that being unhooked provides, which can quickly mean being downed again if you're picked up with the killer nearby. This leads me to the final and most powerful benefit of slugging. Slugging makes it easy for a game to be immediately won irrespective of hook stages or gen count. This is because of how easy it is for killers to keep survivors slugged, even if they're picked up, unless some anti-slugging perks are in use. If you're the killer in this scenario and you see a survivor picking up the slug, you should always prioritize downing the slug again and immediately getting out the altruistic survivor. This is so that the survivor team has one less active member at all times, and it can lead to you eventually downing this second survivor as well. At this point, the game completely warps, and every survivor needs to get their hands off of gens ASAP and try to stabilize the match before it is lost entirely. As a killer, you should only hook both people in this scenario if they're either dead on hook or the slugs are far too apart for you to patrol them, in which case you should hook both close to each other as soon as you feel like they're able to be picked up. Otherwise, hook the survivor with the most amount of hook stages and leave the other slugged. This is to put a timer on survivors to make a play. Alternatively, you can sweat it a bit and pick up a survivor and place them down near the other hook or slug, which makes it even harder for survivors to be able to save both. At this point as killer, you should not leave the proximity of the hooks, of course being careful not to trigger the anti-camp, though that is a really hard thing to accidentally achieve. You don't need to pressure gens because you're already at pressure 4. Remember, if they ignore your pressure and do gens, they will lose, not the other way around. When a survivor comes for a trade, remember the rule. If they go for the slug, prioritize downing them again. If they go for a hook, force them to trade and you're free to slug the trade for 30 seconds while you try to down the unhooked survivor again. By the way, if you didn't know, any anti-tunnel features for the unhooked survivor, both base kit and from perks, go away if the tunneled survivor performs. By the way, if you didn't know, any anti-tunnel features for the unhooked survivor, both base kit and from perks, go away if the tunneled survivor performs a heal action. So if the survivor off hook touches the slug, you're free to tunnel away and put them right back at square one. When you're in this position, the survivors become trapped in a never-ending cycle of trading without being capable of working on gens. At this point, the game is pretty much over. But I know what you're thinking right now. But with all the anti-slugging perks, that scenario will never happen. And though you may think that anti-slugging perks make the choices made until this point completely null, you'd be wrong. This set of perks are something that you'll usually see at most once per lobby. Once you get hit by one and identify who got the endurance, you can continue with your game plan as if nothing had happened. If it is made for this, hit the survivor that was just healed. If it is we're gonna live forever, hit the survivor that performed the healing. And if they have both and you're just left with almost nothing... Actually, even in this unlikely and terrible case, you're still in a huge advantage. See, effectively, that entire slug juggle, for however long or short of a time that it has lasted, it has been borrowed time for the killer. Why? Pressure 4. No gens are being done. Your timer to end the match has essentially been paused for the entire duration of this drawn out play. Even if at the end you just end up having to hook a single survivor, I urge you to think of the consequences. You've gained the hook stage and injured the entire lobby while no time has passed for you. Now, no one can go for the unhook safely, and they all have to choose whether they heal to go for unhook or just slam gens while injured. Both cases are huge for you. Some people could say that slugging is risky because you might end up messing up and not gaining even a single hook from it. However, like I've told you, even if that happens, all of this was during borrowed time. Every single health state that you've taken up until this point has essentially been free. Plus, usually survivor players don't know how to hop back into a game after a slug juggle. With all of that being said, I want to make it clear that not every killer should be played in the same way. This guide will apply to every killer at a baseline, but the ways in which you apply and exploit pressure the most is by using your killer's game style to your advantage. To that end, I will first divide killers broadly into categories and briefly explain how to get the most out of each one, taking into account that there is a bit more nuanced killer to killer even within the same categories. Chase killers. These are the killers whose power has basically one use: reach the survivors quicker and make chases shorter, giving the survivors less time for gens by effectively having little to no downtime. The best killers in the game usually fall into this category, the big names: Nurse, Blight, even Kaneki. The best way for a player to make the most out of these killers is to get better at the killer's specific mechanics and chase patterns. I know it sounds plain, but these killers tend to be busted because of their powers. If you get better at them, you could even, though I wouldn't recommend it, allow yourself to fall behind in some other important areas and use crutches to compensate for a lack of game sense. If you're good at the mechanics, you will get results. But of course, to be near undefeatable, you need to be good in all other areas as well. But yeah, killer-specific mechanics are the main skill needed to make this category shine. Stealth killers. Right on the opposite edge of the balance spectrum, we have this bunch. These killers tend to rely on stealth to get a free hit on a survivor before they run away, effectively cutting the chase time in half. So then, why are they so bad? And how can I make the most of them either way? Well, the reason why these killers tend to be middling at best is because of the flaws lying within the stealth mechanics themselves in DBD. Like I said before, this guide is somewhat aimed toward the higher MMR lobbies, and so we must imagine that every single lobby will be a 4 stack with comms. Comms kill stealth. The survivors don't only have their terror radios to know where you are, they also have their eyes, you know? If they pre-run, and especially if they are attentive to their surroundings and comms from teammates, the match can quickly become difficult for these killers. Listen to me. If you play by the Survivor Handbook, you'll lose every match on stealth killers, except maybe the Wraith. You need to play dirty and chaotically. Stealth shines when it can actually catch people off guard. Crazy, I know. Essentially, your win condition is different than that of other killers. Stop caring about gen progress so much and start paying attention to the state of the survivors. This is because even if you are on 1 or 0 gens left, if the survivors aren't healed and you approach the situation correctly, you can always convert into a forced log and win. Always remember that slugging doesn't care about gen progress. If you're going for slugging, you might even want to drop some gen perks in favor of chase perks like Enduring or Bamboozle. In other words, a stealth player should get better at not feeling the tension when gens are being done, and learn to position survivors in such a way that the game gets compromised, either because everyone's injured and can unhook, or because you're proxying hooks and slugs where they least expect you. When you find a point in a match where you know you have a lot of pressure, drop gens and concentrate around maintaining it. In a way, you should play stealth killers, especially those that don't have access to good map mobility, in an entirely different way than any other, where you prioritize good positioning in chokeholds or around objectives over actually patrolling your gens, since these killers exceed at camping. Not only hooks, but anything they wish. Play like a rat. Make traversing through key parts of the map hell for survivors. I'd personally recommend using anti-healing perks on these killers like Sloppy or Gift of Pain. That's because if they actually stop healing, or if you interrupt it, you can just sneak up on them later and effectively skip a chase altogether. Ranged killers. This category is quite simple. This is comprised of every killer with an ability that can hurt you at a distance. This type of killer has 3 main benefits: anti-looping, proxy camping, and tunneling. As you might have noticed, these are all things that survivors want to make you think are deserving of a car crash for you. But if you're playing killer, it's good to remember that it's your game as well. If you're not just doing it to make everyone miserable, but rather because it's efficient or because you like it, do it. Don't let other people tell you how you should enjoy your game, as long as you're playing within the rules that it provides. OTK killers. These are the killers that are centered not on winning the game bit by bit, but rather want to suddenly swing the state of the match in 1 or 2 plays. Honestly, stealth killers could have perfectly fit here, but I wanted to make the exception to talk about the problems with stealth specifically. Like I said with stealth killers, you can't play the game for hook stages. Use your killer's power to take advantage of survivors when they are most vulnerable, and always try to work toward the situation where survivors can't do gens because they're too busy keeping the game alive. This category is a little too broad as to give any advice more specific than this. So what I'll say instead is that since you're already not gonna win if you play fair, you should definitely go for Feast or Famine perks such as Devour Hope, Know It, and the like. This applies to stealth killers as well. And that would actually be the end of this guide. I hope you've learned something useful out of this. There is a lot more nuance to specific killer mechanics, but I feel like I touched on everything that I wanted to teach for now. I really hope I've explained what pressure is in a way that you can all understand and begin to apply, and I hope to see you again next time. Bye bye!